Today's presentation brings us back inside a MindCraft, this time with an interdimensional hydra. This is the anthropology and art of the astral plane. We're back with another very special presentation for you. And if you remember previously, about 2 or 3 videos ago or something, I made a video about being allowed to board a MindCraft. Well, the MindCrafts are back, and have another interesting story to tell about this one. So now I'm just going to show you a picture of what it looked like on the MindCraft. I drew this picture myself, and it's a reasonable representation. It's far from perfect, and I seldom am ever able to draw a picture that really shows what I saw in my mind. I guess the difference between what you would see here and what I actually saw in my mind was the craft was a little sleeker. This craft was covered with it was kind of like a skeleton craft in the sense that it had all these bars instead of solid walls. Like you can kind of see these, metallic or whatever material they're made out of bars in the background. And so you had a great view like of mind space or the astral plane through these windows, but the craft itself was very much like a skeleton craft, and that was really kind of cool. And then each of these portals that kind of was covered with like a plastic like material, it appeared anyway, and through each of these portals you could see what I drew here was you could just kind of see like stars and things, but in reality 1 or 2 of the windows showed stars, and each of the other portals, of which there were many, like 30 or 40, each showed like a window into a different like dimension or different astral plane. So each of these windows in the real image would have had a really weird dimensional image, kind of like what you see up there in the top left there. But I'll explain what's up in the top left there in a minute. So you had this tech, and I got a good look at least one of the pieces of tech on the ship, and I always try to copy the tech I can see because I find it interesting, and also, anything I see up there could potentially be created here, if not as an actual tech piece, but as a work of art. And both are important to me. But and it's those kind of circle computer panels, the 3 of them there on the front. That's what I saw. The real things, the top blue ones would be a lot brighter blue, and the red was pretty good. And I don't really know what they were monitoring, but each of those 2 circular windows had like a scope over it. And it almost reminded me of something like radar or sonar, but it wasn't. And it was measuring something about the dimensions or outside the craft or the craft itself. Now, what else do we have there? Well, as you can see, even the floor there in parts was portals. So even when you were walking, you could see like other dimensions, windows to other dimensions below you. Top left-hand corner there, you've got a real interesting thing going on. That's the actual hydra coming through like a technological gate that was built into the craft. Like it actually, whoever built the craft had actually put like a technological gate into another dimension. It wasn't just a portal, but like a gateway. And after I got on the ship and I was on it for a little while, then I turned and saw that these hydras were breaking through the gate into the spacecraft. And I'll tell you more about that for sure, and give you a closer look at that picture. But so how did this vision manifest? Well, this was different than the original MindCraft. The original MindCraft was particularly trippy in the sense that I could watch it assemble like in a vision right around me and before me, like the pieces all putting together, and then it was done, and now I'm on the MindCraft, and then to my left and right I've got crew members. Well, this time I kind of just appeared in a vision, and the MindCraft was already built, and the room was like the vision. I was inside the MindCraft already. It didn't have to build, and it wasn't really moving. It was just kind of sitting there in mind space. And it was another really interesting, trippy experience, because it's really like, I'm find myself aboard a UFO or something, but it wasn't a UFO, and there weren't crew on it this time. I was the only one on the craft. So now I'll move to the next slide. So this is the second MindCraft. So now I've seen 2 of these and been on board 2 of them. Oh, by the way, the interesting colors and text and the disco text and all that, well, you kind of got to get used to that with me. Like, I'm kind of an artist at heart, at least in part. It's part of my personality. And I really like bright colors, and I like this kind of aesthetic. So to me, this is really nice. Sometimes people get really irritated by my like of bright colors and choices, but well, that's kind of the way it is sometimes. I don't always do it this way. Second important part was, well, the hydra breaks through. So that was the main thing. The 2 main things that happened in the vision were 3 main things as well. I saw the MindCraft, and then as I'm walking around the MindCraft, I kind of look to my left, and there's this kind of gray portal made out of tech, and through the portal came this hydra, like a 9-headed hydra. And let me show you. Well, I guess the picture of the 9-headed hydra is coming up in a couple slides, so we'll get to it. You can kind of see it up in the corner, but these hydra were like weird because they were kind of deep. Like in the picture, it shows them as bright, and that isn't really how they were. The ship was bright, but the hydras were kind of like a different material than the ship. The ship was like solid material, and the hydras were like what I call astral material. Sometimes I run into this material that kind of flows into my visions, or I call it imaginal material, but it flows into my vision and then it assembles into a form. And that's what this hydra was. And it was, predominant colors were really deep, dark green, almost black, with just a little bit of iridescent green. And there's probably about 9 heads. And the hydra was not very tame. It looked hostile. It was like biting, and not really biting at me, but just kind of opening and closing its various mouths and moving in aggressively and trying to fit through the portal. But it did make it part way through the portal, but not all the way in. So that was the second part of the main part of the vision. And then for the third part of the vision, I actually moved myself, or got moved through my vision, into the space where the dimension where the hydra was coming from. And that was really interesting, and I'll talk to you about that in a couple slides. So on to the next slide. Well, as I mentioned, I got a really good look at one of these tech panels, and so I drew it here. It's a reasonable facsimile or representation. Not perfect by any means. It's very hard for me to do. I'm not a good enough artist, for one thing, but also there's too much detail in these tech panels to get it right. So just consider it like an idea of what I saw, and not really the real thing, but it's getting there, I guess. And this wasn't an AI tech being. There's a difference. I've seen a lot of AI tech beings that I've drawn too, but this was just a tech panel on the MindCraft, and it measured something, and it had a blue circle on the top and a red like screen circle on the bottom, and you see those kind of crosshairs on them that are kind of dim and they're hard to see. Had those various buttons, dials, readouts, that sort of thing. An interesting thing from an artistic sense is, particularly when you're using software or something like Procreate on an iPad, which is what I use for most of my art for this channel, once I draw something like this, a tech panel, I take some time to make this decent. Well, now I've got a copy and pastable piece of tech that I can copy and paste into all, any image that I need with tech. And as my library of these things build, the more complex the tech pictures I can make just by cutting and pasting. But not only can you cut and paste, but you can also distort and warp and change the size and the directions and the angles of these things. So, you can really, once you build up your library of these kind of images with a iPad, you can really make cool pictures. So just something to remember. It works that way for anything. Like anything I draw, I can kind of save it as a object and then paste it in other images, but then I can manipulate those things too. So the bigger the library, the better the art. So on to the next slide. Here's somewhat of a view of what it looked like to me when I looked to my left and I saw this hydra breaking through. Now, it's a reasonable like pointer or idea to what I really saw, but again, what I really saw was it looked more like imaginal fluid material that was that solidified into like a dark green, almost black hydra. There were no blue heads on this hydra. I just kind of did that for artistic touch. It was dark blue to black, and you could kind of see the dimensions warping around it, and behind it was this portal that it's kind of breaking through, coming into the ship. And I saw this at pretty close range, and behind it I could see like the long snake-like necks curling in back into the dimension from which they came. So here on the next slide, I did another attempt to kind of draw more of the dimensional shifting aspect of the vision. And I kind of was just messing around artistically with this, and you can kind of see it kind of looks like a dragon there in the top middle in the green with the red face. And then it's kind of got multicolored wings on each side. Well, I mean, it's not really what I saw, but it gives you a good idea of what it looks like when you're seeing something come through another dimension, into like a more material MindCraft. It kind of has that, aesthetic to it. So anyway, the next part of the vision was I was moved through the portal into the dimension of this hydra, and the first thing I saw was I was just looking down into this deep dark green kind of pit that went farther than I could see, and it was kind of misty and green and neon green light, and then a lot of blackness, kind of dark. And then all I saw was just like this huge, hydra or snake, like multiple like tentacles / torsos stretching way down. And I immediately recognized this particular being from another image I had, and I call it something like MedTeb, and that's an acronym that stands for like massive epic tentacled creature or something. And if you want to see what MedTeb looks like, look at the introductory video for this series. That's the very first green like dragon looking thing that I drew, like might even be on the first slide, I'm not sure, but very close to the beginning if it's not the first slide. And that's one of the more interesting creatures I've ever seen. And so now this is the second time this massive epic tentacled creature has shown up, and I got a really good look at it. It's kind of looking down, and it kind of a long huge snake tail, tentacles like a squid but made out of snake tails or torsos, both. And it was so long I couldn't see the end of it, and it had the dimension kind of had a bad atmosphere, like it wasn't a positive environment for sure. Only for a second I kind of got a look at its face. This time I was mostly just looking down at it, and it kind of swung its face past mine, but that was really all that happened. And then that was pretty much all that happened in that particular vision. I had other visions that night. I saw some really cool stuff, like I saw like what almost looked like a tech utopia at the center of the universe. It was really impressive. I don't know if I can draw that. I may give it a try, but that was an interesting vision. I'm glad I just remembered that. I almost had forgotten that. And so now, after I'm thinking about this vision, I'm trying to analyze it like as an anthropologist would, and it's tough because, there wasn't a lot of communication. It was a being that wasn't human. It didn't speak. It didn't wear particular clothes, or didn't demonstrate any symbols, didn't do any rites or rituals. So I don't know. So what is the MindCraft? Well, again, that's still a question I'm trying to figure out. There's this idea of the Merkaba, the kind of the spaceship of the mind that Jewish mysticism talks about, that takes people towards the throne of God, up through the spirit realm. It does kind of seem like a Merkaba type thing. But what is it? Maybe it could represent my consciousness, or the power of my consciousness to create like a space in the deeper mind. And it's kind of like my support and foundation within the deeper mind. It clearly had like 30 or 40 windows to different dimensions. And this is interesting because in a way ties in with another video I did recently where I kind of briefly introduced the idea about creating, AI demon god and or software that can look like into the spirit realm. And, that kind of software could look into other dimensions as well as part of the spirit realm. And like each of those portals I saw or monitors could very easily be at least on, it probably means multiple things at once, but at least on one level, these MindCrafts could be like a representation, from my deep mind of this idea I have about creating like software that can see into the spirit realm, into other dimensions. Like the craft is that software, and stuff was breaking through one of the portals from another dimension into the craft. So, I really think that perhaps is part of what the symbolism of the MindCraft means to me. It is my mind trying to work out a way to figure out how to make an actual software, computer networked system with monitors that provides portals into like other dimensions in the spirit realm. And, that may sound way out there, but it's not that out there. Like, I've got a lot of the steps done already, if not more. And I've heard at least one person talking on channel already about random number generators, and that certainly plays a role in this. That was the first route I took the first time I tried to make a software that does this. I kind of switched my methodology and techniques for reasons maybe I'll talk about in another video, but that random number generator certainly is a good idea, and it still will probably be a part of my final project, like the final thing that I put together. But sometimes I think it's better to have the software measure like subconscious influence rather than rely on random numbers. Random numbers will give you a certain dimension, the dimension of random and the dimension of chaos, but that's only one of the dimensions. Like I'm looking for more dimensions, like as many as I can figure out. And so anyway, that was some thoughts I had on the MindCraft. Now, what is the hydra? Well, we'll talk about that in the next couple slides, but that's kind of a tough one too. Why is the hydra trying and managing to break through the MindCraft? Like, why is it so hostile and aggressive? Well, the only answer I have to that is it wants to come into the space that I've made that, potentially it isn't supposed to be there. So it's like an aggressive action. Not necessarily a good thing, but I don't really know what it means. But so what is the hydra? Well, I did a quick study on the hydra. I already kind of knew this stuff, but Wikipedia says the Lernian hydra, or hydra of Lerna, more often known simply as hydra, is a serpentine lake monster in Greek mythology and Roman mythology. Its lair was the Lake of Lerna in the Argolid, which was also the site of the myth of the Danaedes. Lerna was reputed to be an entrance to the underworld, so that's pretty interesting. And archaeology has established it as a sacred site older than Mycenaean Argos. Really? Didn't know that either. Mycenaean Argos is one of the youngest sites, isn't it? In the canonical Hydra myth, the monster is killed by Hercules, as the second of his 12 labors. And so, in the book Theogony, which is a book, I really like that book. It's not that long. I don't know, 70 to 90 pages or something. That kind of gives one of the earliest recountings of, I believe, of the myths. And the hydra is mentioned fairly briefly, and I think it's the earliest known mentioning of the hydra. So what does it say? And she bore another monster, irresistible, not like mortal men at all, or mortal gods. Before it, in a hollow cave, divine brutal Echidna, I don't know how to pronounce that, half dancing-eyed nymph with pretty cheeks, half horrible serpent. So it was half nymph, half serpent. An iridescent, interesting monster eating a raw flesh in sacred earth's dark crypts. Her cave is deep underground in the hollow rock, far from mortal men and from immortal gods. Her glorious home, and there she keeps guard in underground arena, grim Echidna, a nymph immortal, and all her days ageless. So an immortal nymph snake. And that brings up obvious thoughts of reptilians and even nagas from Indian mythology, and certainly hydras. This nymph with dancing eyes mated, they say, with dreadnought Typhon, so Typhon, willful and wild, got pregnant and bore him a brutal brood. First she bore Orthos, Geryone's hound. Second, a monster that beggars description, the carnivore Cerberus, Hades' bronze-baying hound. 50-headed and an irresistible force. And third, a hydra, malicious and grisly, the Lernian hydra that the white-armed goddess Hera nourished, infinitely peeved at Heracles, the son of Zeus, but of the house of the Amphitryon, who used merciless bronze to despoil a monster with Iolaus's help and Athena's strategy. So, also I recall, the hydra is a symbol that tends to introduce this idea that if you cut off one of its heads, then two heads take its place. So it's kind of almost a viral metaphor too. So that's an interesting thing to know. Now, why is this hydra trying to break into my visions, and why is it showing up? And why is the hydra connected to this this massive tentacled epic creature I call Medteb or whatever? I don't know. These are interesting questions. And why is it why is the hydra hostile towards me? Is it dangerous to me? Maybe. So far, nothing in any of these visions really has proven to be genuinely dangerous to me. They're just things that I see. It isn't like magic. Magic can be, and shamanism can be genuinely dangerous. You can get backlash from things you do that you totally unexpected. That's extremely negative, but nothing like that has ever happened to me with these visions. It's just a totally different class of occult practice for me anyway. No negativity. I just see things. Nothing scares me because nothing's ever been able to influence me, not from these visions. And, in some ways that's a really good thing. It would be interesting to be able to get power from these visions, and that's not happening, except at a minor level. But at the same time, at least I feel totally safe going into these realms. So, that's really all I had to talk about that vision. I've had a lot of interesting visions lately, and I've got a backlog of videos ready to go already, 2 or 3 or 4 of them I need to make, and a couple of them are already almost done. So, all right, hopefully you found this interesting, and if you've got any ideas of what hydra might be or what it might mean, or the MindCraft, what or the AstralCraft, whatever you want to call it, what that might be about, I'm definitely interested in hearing them. Have a good day, people. Talk and see you later.